Hello and welcome to episode 14 of MMO Weekly, presented as always by MetsmerizedOnline.com. I'm your host, Sal Manzo, and joining us once again this week after a brief hiatus, MMO Executive Editor Mike Mayer. Mike, how we doing, buddy?
Doing good. Things are starting to heat up on the trade market, and the Mets just won 6 straight games.
Absolutely, and we'll get to that trade deadline stuff there that you mentioned. But we'll start right with there as far as the Mets, end in July on a 6-game win streak. Obviously, took the last game of the Padres series at Citi Field, then proceeded to sweep the Yankees in 2 games and just swept the Marlins in Miami. Things are riding high. You get Jacob deGrom pitching tomorrow. We'll get our first taste of the Scherzer deGrom double-headed monster starting tonight. So a lot of good things looking up here. So I just wanted to get your kind of take for how the Mets looked in July and how they're set up here now for the stretch run in August, September.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about starting pitching with Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom. Starting pitching is the big reason why they did so good in July. Carlos Carrasco had a 0.90 ERA. Max Scherzer was one of only 8 players in Major League history to have 1.5 ERA or lower, strike out 45 or more, and have 5 or less walks in 1 month. So Taijuan Walker was good too. And we know Edwin Diaz is going to very likely win reliever of the month for the 2nd straight month. The pitching is just clicking on all fronts. Obviously, we know that the Mets are going to still try to add to the bullpen, like we'll talk about later. But between the pitching and then Starling Marte, you got to talk about just how good of a month he had. It was a huge, huge month. He was the Mets' best offensive player for the month, and it came out a big time for the Mets. They had some spells in there where Lindor and Alonso were kind of cold. Nimmo went cold for a while. McNeil went cold for a while, but Marte really just carried him through the month. And then Vogelback has been great since the Mets picked him up. He's been on base 10 out of 18 plate appearances. Can't ask for much more for that. And he's been in the middle of a lot of the rallies that they've had. So Vogelback's been a huge pickup very early.
Yeah, no, definitely. And just, to piggyback on Vogelback there, I knew obviously he had pop. We knew about that. And, I think that was one of the big reasons they wanted to bring him in, because they want to get a little bit more, out of the DH role that they've gotten with, Dom Smith and JD Davis. JD Davis a little bit now the last week or so has been, hitting the ball pretty well. But in general, they've not gotten much out of the DH position besides Alonso. But I was surprised just how much he walks. You mentioned he's been on base 10 times as a Met so far. I think they've won all 6 games that he's been with the Mets. So maybe they don't need to make any more trades. It's the Vogelback effect. No, I'm just kidding. But, it's nice to see. Maybe, it seems like a shot in the arm. He comes to a team that's in contention as opposed to, playing with the Pirates there. Not much to, motivate you. You thrust into a pennant race. And so far, he's been great. Just as far as getting on base, has quality at bats. I think I could think of maybe one at bat was kind of, not non-compete so far that he's had. He seems to see a lot of pitches. He knows his strike zone, knows his approach. I know they've interviewed him. Gelb's interviewed him, a bit now that he's been on the team. He seems pretty comfortable. He seems to have a plan. Happy to be here. So I give, the front office a lot of credit for making that trade, because personally, I didn't like it for what they gave up at Holderman for a reliever that was pitching pretty well for them and had so much control. And I didn't think it was good to take away from strength necessarily. But this is why we have day jobs and they work in baseball, because they know what they're doing a little bit better than me. So glad to see that there. You mentioned the pitching. It's been stellar. And, a lot of that, Scherzer's now back this month. He's been great, like you said. But, the bulk of June, some of July, they've been doing this without Scherzer, without deGrom. The pitching staff's just, picked them up and been great. They've, virtually kept them in every single game that they've had. Peterson's been awesome when he starts. Obviously don't love him in the 8th inning from the other day, but that's another story. And that's what the trade deadline here is for. And just to your point on Starling Marte, I think folks were a little probably upset at first, to see that Michael Conforto wasn't coming back and, fill that void in right field when, even originally he was signed to be a center fielder, but then they moved him over. But you have to be more than pleased, because as of right now, the Mets haven't gotten production like this from a right fielder in a few years now. Besides the fact that he's hitting the ball well, he hits for some power. Speed. He plays great defense. He runs the base as well. And in general, seems like a good teammate, and guys seem to gravitate toward him, and, they're having a good time. So, I think that's really impressive there. You mentioned Lindor was kind of cold, a few guys like that. I think it's worth noting that, Lindor, when he broke his finger, was that in May or June? I forget the exact date.
June, yeah.
he had some weeks there he wasn't playing well. I think he had like
Yeah.
under 200 batting average, whatever it was. The power wasn't really there, but this month he picked it up. I think he slashed like 320. He had like over a 160 weighted runs created plus, which is great. So it seems like that finger's healed up and he's able to get through that, which I think is a big thing. And Edwin Diaz, man, I don't know what to say anymore about him because he was one pitch away from an immaculate inning Saturday. I was pulling for Wayne to get that. I know he was pumped to make that call, but they did it in 10 pitches, unfortunately. But he's just absolutely electric. And I just can't imagine the more he keeps racking up these strikeouts and dominating guys, the more that price tag is just going to come up for him in the offseason. Is about to get, make a major payday. But,
And I think we have to talk about, we've got to mention Adam Ottavino too.
Mm-hmm.
0.82 ERA in July. I mean, this is a guy when the Mets signed him was kind of like, well, he's just a depth bullpen guy, which is fine. I mean,
Right.
You need those type of guys, but he's really been pushed into a high leverage. I mean, he's been the setup guy a lot of times for
Right.
Diaz, and a lot of times he's pitching multiple innings too. So he's been huge for the Mets recently.
Yeah.
He's been good all year, but even more recently, he's just been huge for a bullpen that has needed that type of guy with Smith getting injured and him struggling before then, them trading Holderman, like you noted, Lugo being kind of up and down, and they needed someone to step up, and Ottavino's been exactly that guy right now.
Yeah, no, definitely. And you mentioned also Seth Lugo, and a point I wanted to make. The last couple outings, he's gone back to, it seems like, more of the guy that we saw in 17, 18, 19 that would, pitch 2 innings every 3 days and was dominant at that. This year, like you said, he's been a lot up and down. But the last couple of outings he's been more of that multi-inning reliever. And it seems like he's kind of fared back well into that. So I wonder, obviously you have McGill coming back at some point. He's going to come back in the bullpen, which I think is going to be a great addition for how hard he throws. You get him for an inning like that, I think it could be super valuable. And again, if Lugo can be that guy where he's pitching 2 innings every 3 days and can, shut down like that, I think that's where he's his best. And if he's healthy enough to do so, I think that's another huge boost for the Mets. But, obviously they definitely still need another back-end reliever. David Peterson, we brought it up kind of at nauseum the last couple of days, pitching that 8th inning in the Yankee series. I think everybody was kind of like, whoa, to that. I know they wanted to get him, I guess, see what he could do, because in the postseason, that's probably going to be his role or whatever. But, you want more something more solidified than him, I would think, in the late innings there. But, I guess we can kind of transition from talking about the guys here to now a bit of the trade deadline, talking about, some names and things like that. A name I guess you and I talked about a little bit was Andrew Chafin with the Tigers. I was wondering, what you're maybe hearing about that, thoughts there. I know a lot of this is also, in regards to if they, can't pull off a Contreras Robertson deal. I know the price is very high there. So I was just wondering kind of for those not secondary market, but other options, so to speak, that they could be looking at, especially for a left-handed reliever in this market.
Yeah, they like Chafin. They did this off season. It kind of just didn't work out for whatever reason. He's a good match for them. 2.53 ERA this year.
Mm-hmm.
He's actually been better against righties this year. 4.480 OPS, but lefties only have a 620 OPS. So, I mean, that's obviously still an improvement over the Mets pen right now. They essentially have Joely Rodriguez as their lefty out of the pen, and he has been bad, to say the least. And like you mentioned, David Peterson. Peterson, when he started for AAA yesterday. So, I mean, I we don't need to dig into that too much, but he's going to be a reliever for the Mets for the rest of the year, you would think. Mm-hmm. So I was kind of surprised to see them kind of go that way with Peterson. And while we're talking about AAA and lefties, Sapucki has pitched as a reliever 2 times in his last 3 outings, and he's actually looked really good. I know Mets fans kind of have a rough taste in their mouth of him after the Giants, but I've been saying for at least a year now that this is a guy that's going to thrive in the bullpen because of in 1 inning stint, he can be 95, 96 and has a really good curveball. So when you have a lefty that can throw 95, 96 and has another, his curveball is a plus pitch, that combination is going to work well in the bullpen. So, but yeah, I mean, getting back to, it would be nice if they would be able to get a lefty, a veteran lefty like Chafin that we mentioned. There's other options out there. I just know that they specifically like him and have shown interest. Matt Moore from the Rangers has had an incredible year. You got to believe they're out of it. So you got to believe with him being a free agent, that he'll be available. 1.66 ERA this year. He's been very tough on lefties. Absolutely another guy that they should give a look. Another guy I was thinking about today, which because they've been talking about the Red Sox with JD Martinez and Christian Vasquez, one of the combo options they've been talking about. They got Rich Hill too. The Red Sox have, who's going to be a free agent after the year. Obviously, Mets fans are familiar with Dick Mountain, and he could be another guy that could help out if they swing a deal there. So yeah, there's some lefty options out there. I don't think it kind of depends. Like if they get Robertson shuts down lefties. So they might, if you get him first, then the second reliever you just might seek the best reliever that you're looking for instead of a specific lefty. But it certainly wouldn't hurt to get two guys to get lefties out, considering right now they don't have like a specific guy that they're going to go to if there's a big lefty up. I mean, well, they're going to go to Jolie Rodriguez, but that just hasn't worked out this year. So yeah, between Chafin, Matt Moore, Rich Hill, I know there's others. Joe Mantiply from the Diamondbacks has been mentioned, but he's got a ton of years of control. So
and he's been asked. That's going to cost you a ton.
It'll cost you a ton. Gregory Soto from the Tigers too. Another guy that's been really good but has years of control. So obviously you'd like to get either of those guys, but those are going to cost you a little more in prospect capital. So we'll see if the Mets really want to go out and spend that type of capital on the lefty reliever. And then like you mentioned, it's kind of right now the Mets are kind of in this holding pattern because they're talking to the Red Sox about packages, JD Martinez, Christian Vasquez, and they've been talking for a while with the Cubs with Wilson Contreras and David Robertson. The Mets feel like the ask for both of those packages is a little high right now. And specifically with the Cubs, it seems like the Contreras market has kind of slowed down once the Soto market picked up. Because Soto is obviously now the best bat on the market if available. And there's some teams that have interest in him that would have interest in Contreras if Soto, the Nationals decide they're going to wait on Soto. So that's kind of what's holding up the Contreras market is, I mean, after Soto, he's the best bat that there is likely available. Ohtani is not available, as Heyman reported today. So Contreras is going to be that guy that a lot of teams look for. So the Cubs are going to hold on to him, which I think is smart to kind of hold on to him to as long as they can to see what happens with Soto. So, and then you talk about the Red Sox, and I know there's been a lot of talk about JD Martinez, and I know there's folks with the Mets that do like JD. I have some issues. His power has been gone for a while because of his back. I mean, he missed about a week with his back recently, back issues. So I have some concerns there, and I'm sure that's part of the Mets negotiation as well. We have to take into account the back issues that he's had to what we're going to be willing to give up. I know someone mentioned Dom Smith today, which the Red Sox have liked in the past. And obviously that's a fit for the Mets because they do want to move on from Dom and give him an opportunity to play somewhere else at this point. The Mets would obviously like to move JD Davis too, if they could. He's been in conversations with teams. There's not a ton of value to JD Davis or Dom Smith at this point because they've both struggled a lot this year. And they're both pretty much first base DHs. So there's not a ton of value there. And while we're talking about first base DH, and another name that gets tossed around a lot is Mark Vientos. There's a lot of stuff being talked about with Vientos. A lot of different reports, some of it kind of weird, about the Mets trying to hold on to him. Some of the reports made it essentially sound like he was an untouchable type of guy. And that just doesn't make any sense. That to me sounds like Sandy Alderson, Billy Epler, whoever's leaking the info is trying to drive up the value of Mark Vientos. He's not an untouchable type of prospect. And look, he's hit well in AAA this year. He showed off a ton of power. He has struggled against right-handers,
Right.
and he has struck out over 33% against right-handers. So, and now he's a first base DH only guy when he was playing third before. So I
Hmm.
mean, that really knocks down your value. And some folks that I've talked to from other teams recently have mentioned these teams aren't stupid. They're scouting.
Right.
They do all this stuff. They know that Vientos is now a first base DH only guy that
Right.
struggled against right-handers. So that's obviously a knock on his value. So I think if the Mets do trade him, I think some Mets fans might be surprised at the lack of return.
Right.
Um, they might be a little surprised at how little value Vientos has to this point. Which I mean, it's tough because the position he's in. But I guess the good news is the Mets have had a lot of other top prospects play really well.
Right.
Francisco Alvarez is heating up in AAA. Brett Beatty had an unreal July in AA. And Alex Ramirez is showing a ton of power right now for Brooklyn. So I would have to think that all three of those guys are staying put, and the Vientos, the Ronnie Mauricio,
Right.
and then you start dipping into the Khalil Lees and other type of prospects are the ones that we see traded.
Now, let me ask you as far as Vientos, because again, I've heard him a lot, and especially kind of linked to Vasquez and JD Martinez with the Red Sox there. Would you be comfortable giving up a guy like Vientos? And now, again, perfect world, if you could package, Dom Smith, JD Davis, Vientos, and maybe another lower end prospect for Vasquez and JD Martinez. Would you do that? Would you feel comfortable just from the fact that you're getting two guys in their walk year and also one in JD Martinez, who's older at this point? Like you said, he's lacking from the power department, but I guess a plus is he's got a lot of postseason experience, hitting experience, which I think would benefit this this Mets team as far as in win now mode and a veteran kind of laden lineup. So I'm just wondering if you would feel comfortable if that was kind of a package that the Red Sox were willing to do for that.
Um, I think that's certainly, from the people I talked to, that's where his value is
Okay.
at this point. I think Vientos for like Martinez and Vasquez as rentals. I think that's where he's at. I think that's
Gotcha.
where his value's at. I think if that did happen, Mets fans would be like, let's say hypothetically, it's Dom Smith and Mark Vientos for JD Martinez and Christian Vasquez. I think a lot of Mets fans would understand that the Mets certainly got better at two positions
Hmm.
at the DH, and definitely at catcher. They've struggled at catcher this year, and
Right.
Vasquez has been good both defensively and offensively. So you'll obviously upgrade two positions, but I do think the reaction would be still, wow, they were able to use Vientos in a trade, but you'd think they would get more control
Right.
coming back.
Right.
But no, you bring up a good point. I think that's where his value is at this point. The Mets stopped playing him at third base,
Right.
so he's not a third baseman anymore. So once you do that you're hurting. Once it's known that he's not a third baseman anymore, his value takes a dip already.
Yeah.
And then the fact that he has struggled against right-handed pitching is a big knock because that's the short side of the platoon. So even if you have a guy that really mashes lefties, that still minimizes his value because he's still going to only be in the lineup a third of the time. So yeah, I think his value isn't as high as you would think it is just looking at his raw numbers.
Right.
I think is probably the best way to put it.
And another guy, I guess I'm just curious if you think that there's any chance, like, we've talked about Josh Bell before. He's having a good year. He's a switch hitter. He's obviously younger than a guy like JD Martinez, plays first base. So that would help as far as when you need to, when you want to swap Alonso, in the DH role and you need someone to play, defensively there, he can do that. Do you think that the price tag would just kind of be too high for as far as in division and it's another rental player? Because I feel like in theory it wouldn't take a ton. But I guess from the Mets, as far as being in the division, I would assume the Nationals are going to just always jack the price up, as far as if you're going to do that. So I was wondering if you're hearing anything as far as if there's any momentum with that kind of deal, or if there's just a lot of teams in on him, and with the Mets being in division, it's probably just not worth it.
Yeah, I mean, before the Mets got Vogelback, there was a lot of buzz.
Right.
The Mets were, I think that's kind of where it went, was the Mets really wanted Bell, and that was their first choice. and the Nats kind of let that price tag be known, and that's when the Mets shifted to getting Vogel back. Um, I don't think that's an option anymore. I would say at this point the Mets got Vogel back and then got Naquin. So they
Gotcha.
got two
Gotcha.
guys that they were looking to improve against right-handed pitching, and they did that. And I think they thought they did that at a more cost-effective
Gotcha.
way than going out and Josh Bell. The Nats, yeah, the Nats. That's why initially when it was like, oh, hey, Soto's available, and everyone's Mets, 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 and then
Yeah.
well, you find out, well, yeah, the Nationals a don't really want to deal with the Mets if they don't have to,
Right.
and B, I mean, they don't have to in these trades. There's enough teams like with Soto. There's enough other teams that have really good prospects, and with Bell, there's enough other teams now that need a bat that they don't have to unless the Mets blow them away.
Right.
So yeah, I don't think there's any chance there's not a good chance of the Mets
Right.
landing any Nationals. I know Carl Edwards Jr. was another guy like they had talked about when they were talking with them. The Nationals, he's a reliever that has
Mm-hmm.
pitched pretty good this year. So, but that's what the Mets have been talking about too, is trying to do these package deals like we've talked about, trying to get a bat
Right.
and an arm from the
Right.
same team. Which makes it simpler just to be able to work with one team to fill a
Right.
couple of needs there. But yeah, I would say at this point, Bell's likely to go elsewhere. And it's kind of funny that we haven't heard much about Bell
Yeah.
because I mentioned Contreras as the best bat after Soto, but really
Right.
Bell has been the better offensive player this year than Contreras, and he's probably the best bat that's available. And whoever gets him is going to get a nice punch to the lineup.
Yeah. And I just want to kind of circle back to the reliever market real quick, and a name that I just kind of wanted to bring up to you, see what you thought. Aaron Loop, I'm sure, is available. The Angels are not good. He was great with the Mets last year, obviously, like kind of all-time great, had one of the great reliever seasons out there. I know the Angels gave him kind of, a big deal in the sense for a couple of years. It's not the most economic friendly. But what would you think about being able to get a guy like that who has pitched well in New York in the past, and it's I would assume not going to cost a ton because you would be taking on his salary mostly. So I was just kind of wondering if you thought of if he would be a fit for this 2022 team.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Mets would certainly have interest at a really low cost.
Mm-hmm.
Because like you said, 2 years, 17 million. So
Yeah.
that's a hefty price for a loogie that's not pitching very well
Right.
right now. So it would certainly have to be at a really low cost, and they'd have to like miss out on all the other options that they're hoping to get.
Gotcha.
Because I mean, the Angels don't have to trade him either. They
Right.
could hope for a bounce back next year and
Mm-hmm.
potentially trade him next year. Um, yeah, but wouldn't that be? Well, more hypotheticals. Aaron Loop and Noah Syndergaard to the Mets for whoever. Like, can you
Imagine
imagine?
that.
Yeah, can you imagine Syndergaard coming back and I mean helping out whatever you can because they're like using a 6-man rotation, so you
Mm-hmm.
could basically use them in like any role and then Loop. But yeah, it would be interesting to see. There's plenty of ex Mets that might get traded, so
Yep.
it's always gonna like be fun to talk about. Well, what are the Mets gonna do? Wilmer Flores is one that has kind of picked up steam on Mets Twitter, mostly because the Giants have been terrible recently. So they haven't said if they're gonna sell, or it hasn't been reported if they're gonna sell. But if they do, I mean, Wilmer Flores is a good fit for the Mets
Yeah.
right now. They need someone who hits lefties pretty well, and that's like the positions they're looking at is first base, DH, that type of thing. Pinch hitter. I mean, we know what Wilmer Flores can do as a pinch hitter.
Yep.
So I mean, he's certainly a fit for the Mets if they decide to sell and kind of the other options kind of fall to the wayside. So I can't even imagine how Mets Twitter would respond to either of those. Syndergaard would be a really weird because of some of the stuff this year, and
Yep.
so Flores would obviously it would be like I don't think the Mets could make another trade outside of Soto that would have like a better response to than the Mets getting Wilmer Flores.
It's true. That would be really cool. Just in the story of like him coming back to another pennant race team, and we know, like you said, you know what he does as far as he's the walk. He was the walk off king with the Mets. He can play a lot of different positions now too. At least on the infield, you can put him at first, you put him at third. That would be cool. Syndergaard, I don't know. I just don't know if that would even happen. I don't know what his contract is like, if they could even trade him or whatever. But I would imagine that he was good. He would stay as far away from here as possible after everything that went on. But Loop would be cool. Another reunion like there. Gregory Soto is a name from the Tigers I keep thinking of. I know that he has a lot of control left. He was an all-star this year, would cost him a lot. I just think more of, the more Edwin Diaz pitches, the higher that price tag keeps going up for the winter. And I just wonder if a guy like that you maybe bring in to bridge the gap 8 and 9, you kind of get that super bullpen in the back end there. And then if Diaz does leave to free agency, that you have a guy that you would think, in all intents and purposes, then your replacement. So I wonder if they would do something like that. I guess it all depends on how the market's going to shape up here. If there's names flying off the board or whatever, it's just it's fun to speculate with a team now that doesn't have any impingements or hindrances as far as finances or anything like that. I know Cohen doesn't have unlimited money, and we've talked about it, but they'll do whatever it takes to get the best deal to win. So it's cool to throw all these hypotheticals out now, and anything could happen at this point. Years past it wasn't like that, but really, if the price is right, if the deal is good, the Mets are going to do whatever they have to do to upgrade there. So I think in general, it's going to be a fun deadline. It's been a bit boring so far. I know Passing put it, called it pretty boring so far, but ton with a team that's almost 30 games over 500, that's in first place. There's not a ton that you're going to do anyway. You know what I mean? You're not going to, I don't think, go crazy to making additions and things like that. I would think that it's more the back end of the bullpen is a major need that I think they'll address. If they can get another bat, that's great. Whether, if it's a Vasquez and a Martinez or a Wilson Contreras, CJ Cron, whoever it might be, right, to fill that kind of DH role. But they're kind of, set to rock and roll. It's like a couple of minor things, but this is a team that's really good as is. And now you're getting Jacob deGrom back, who starts tomorrow, which I think we should talk a little bit about, right? First time through, the two-headed monster. Scherzer's pitching tonight, deGrom's pitching tomorrow. Obviously, it's against the Nats. Take it with a grain of sand. But just how excited are you to see deGrom back on the mound now? And what are you realistically expecting out of him, at least until, I guess, let's say September or end of September? Because you would think that the reins aren't going to be off until, I guess, playoff time if things all go well. I know deGrom made sure to tell everyone he's still opting out at the end of the year. So it's a very curious scenario for a lot of reasons. But at the end of the day, it's good stuff because you're going to have Jacob deGrom on a mound for the New York Mets for, however the rest along the season is.
Yeah, I mean, this is what everyone's been envisioning since the Mets signed Max Scherzer, is to get to watch these guys back to back. So everyone's obviously excited about that. And it just happens to be happening during the trade deadline. So, I mean, things are crazy enough as it is. And then you have this on top of the trade deadline. So things are crazy in Mets land and everyone's excited. I think with deGrom, it's tough. I mean, if you ask me, I know people are saying not to overreact to a start and stuff, but his last start in Syracuse, outside of just giving up the home runs, which obviously you feel however you feel about it, his velocity wasn't there. He was 95, 96 mostly. Right. That's where he was sitting. He topped out at 98. Obviously, we know that's not deGrom right now. He's topping out at 100, 101 every game. Right. It wasn't him holding back or whatever. We know that. We know that they very quietly mentioned that it was a leg thing. Right. So hopefully it was just cramping is what they called it. So hopefully it was that. But if you watch the entire start, you could tell there was an issue there. He wasn't finishing his fastball off. He didn't have his command of his fastball. He didn't have command of any of his pitches. So I don't think worried is the right word. I'm cautiously optimistic about like what he's going to do. And I think that's where you should be anyway, because we're over a year from the last time he pitched. So yeah, I think I obviously it's a good setup for him to pitch against the Nationals in his first start. That's good for him. So you can kind of ease him into it or whatever. go out, pitch 5 innings against the Nationals. Um, that's a good start. See where he's at, and then kind of go from there of really how far that it's going to be start by start.
Right.
So you see what he does against the Nats, see how he looks. Is his velocity back to 100?
Mm-hmm.
Is he command, or even more importantly, is he commanding his fastball? I mean,
Right.
that's what
Right.
makes Jacob deGrom great.
Yep.
Is he can pinpoint whatever he wants, and he couldn't in his last AAA start. So if he's doing that in the next start, then you take the reins off a little bit.
Right.
6 innings,
Right.
let him kind of do his things, and you progress from there. So yeah, so I think that's the big thing I'll be looking for is his command going to be there against the Nationals? And I mean, obviously, you want to see him higher than 95, 96 sitting
Right.
there, unless he's actually deciding he wants to dial it back.
Right.
But that wasn't the case, or at least we haven't heard that was the case to this point. So.
Yeah, and that was something that I thought of initially because everyone's kind of talked about that over the last year. How deGrom's going to have to learn how to pitch at 85, 90%, sit there and rear back and get to that 100 when he needs. But we've seen, through the spring before he got hurt and now through his rehab starts besides the last one, he was sitting at 100. So that's something you just don't decide to do, I would assume. The last rehab start before you go to the majors, you're not going to say, I'm going to, tinker with throwing at 85% and see how that works. I think that's something you would build yourself up to. So, I don't think that's happening there. I think, maybe eventually, right? And if he can, continues to sustain injuries, it's going to be something I guess he's going to have to do. But hopefully it was just a leg thing. I know they said it was the cramp or whatever, like you said. So hopefully that gets taken care of. We know the Mets don't know how to drink water sometimes. So that's a problem. But, it'll be fun to see him again. Also, I think, and you kind of said it, like it's just going to be, watching start by start. And I think for the most part, everyone's kind of going to be holding their breath with every start that he has. The last year, I think it's very telling as far as whether I don't want to call it minor things, or it just seems like, for a guy that throws super hard and is 34, like he's not used to his body maybe being, feeling completely fresh after starts, things like that. It seemed like little things would kind of set him back, which is a bit of a concern. And the fact that and you do whatever you got to do, but he just continues to talk about opting out after the season. And if you're going to do that, you got to pitch, right? You're not just telling people that, and then you're going to, go out there, pitch 4 innings. You tweak the hamstring, your shoulder's hurting again. Now you're not going to see me again for 2 weeks, maybe make another start. I would assume at some point, if you keep making it a point to want to tell everyone, tell the world you're going to opt out and get to the open market, you got to show that you can pitch. So I'm just kind of, worried, or not worried, but just interested as far as what the balance is for that. And I'm sure the Mets are going to want to, show that he could pitch too. You want to show the rest of the league on notice, hey, our horse is back, watch out. But it'll be interesting to see the way it all plays out. And the Mets are in a position where they've weathered not having him for the whole season. And if something happens again, I guess they're going to continue to weather that, and they've shown that they can do it. So just getting him back is a huge plus. Hopefully it stays like that. We'll see what happens, but we should enjoy tonight and tomorrow. Finally get to see the two horses there together. But hopefully, I don't know, by September, this is all a perfect world. Like I said, I'm gonna be holding my breath every time he touches the ball. But if things, go right for the next month, hopefully come September, you take the reins off and he's, ready to rock and roll. Because if you got him and Scherzer, at the top of that billing for a short playoff series and they're healthy, good luck, man. Good luck. That's, I know, what everybody's hoping for. So, we wish it all the best there. I guess real quick, I kind of want to talk about a couple of things, trade-wise that happened, not on the Mets. Padres traded for Josh Hader today. Didn't give up any really their top prospects that would have thought for someone of that magnitude. So people still saying they could be in play for Soto. Who knows? But I just want to get your reaction to the Hader trade to San Diego, considering that the Brewers are in first place and are a playoff contender. I didn't really understand that, but just your thoughts there and seeing how that could affect the other dominoes now, the last few days of the trade deadline.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly an interesting move, and it was kind of a couple minutes before it broke that he got traded to the Padres. It was out there that the Braves were interested too. Mm-hmm. So obviously good news for the Mets that he ended up with the Padres instead of the Braves. So, yeah, I mean, well, they did get Robert Hassel, who was one of the Padres' best prospects, Estuary Ruiz, who they had up earlier this year, and then to get Rogers back, who's obviously he's having a down year, but right. I mean, he's been an all-star reliever before. So, yeah, I mean, the Padres got a ton back in that deal. Yeah. I mean, the Brewers got a ton back, and the Padres, I mean, AJ Preller is not afraid to take a shot.
Yep.
Which is why whenever there's teams mentioned for Soto, that's why they're mentioned. A, he's not afraid to take a shot, and B,
Right.
they have a very good farm
Yep.
system, and they still do even after this trade. So, yeah, I mean, I guess we can finally stop talking about him potentially going to the Mets, because that seemed like the rumor every
Yeah.
year is that, hey, the Mets like Josh Hader. Hey, the Mets like Josh Hader, and they're, I mean, they had some preliminary discussions and stuff, but
Right.
I don't think it ever got to a serious point. And yeah, I mean, the Padres, they're, even with Hader, they're still not the best team in that division. So we'll see what the Dodgers do to kind of counter that. But yeah, it was kind of surprising to see that come. And
Yeah.
like I said, I mean, for the Mets, it's certainly a good thing that he didn't go to the Braves or. Uh,
And I know Jeffries is, he's a great reliever for the Brewers, but you would think you'd want to keep your two-headed monster, especially they're not out of it. They're in first place. They're a playoff
Williams,
contender.
Williams,
Trevor, yes, yes. Devin Williams, I'm sorry.
yeah.
The changeup artist. But I just don't understand taking away a strength like that, especially in a sport where
Yeah.
the bullpen is so so heavy and so you especially come playoff time. But I guess they like their smaller market team. I guess I believe Hader is a free agent. What, after the 2023 season,
Yeah.
or is he?
After next year. Yeah.
So you get another year of control. So they got probably the most they could get for him, so to speak. And I think he had a few outings where kind of rough, like six outings where he wasn't great, but still, he's been the best left-hand reliever in the sport for a few years now. So it sounds like it's I guess a win for both sides as far as the haul for the Brewers. And then, the Padres getting, one of the best left-handed relievers in the game. I guess we'll see how that works. Like you said, thank goodness he didn't go to the Braves. That would have been awful.
And speaking
But
of Braves moves, they designated Robinson Cano today.
terrible,
He didn't
terrible.
last very long there. Kind of surprised that he lasted
Yeah.
as long as he did.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, this might be that final stop. I mean, the Mets gave him a chance to start this year. Probably a little too longer than they should have. Padres gave him some run, and now the Braves have given him some run. So he's been cut by 3 teams this year. So I'd have to think this might be. Knowing him, he will probably still keep trying to play, but
Yeah.
I'm not so. I think we're pretty confident at this point that we've seen the last of him being a contributor at the major league level.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I hear Japan's lovely this time of year. He might have to be going there to get some everyday playing time. But hey, man, it is what it is. I'm just glad he's not on the Mets anymore. Made them much better. Addition by subtraction there. But it is what it is. I was also surprised they kept him as long as they did. I thought he was just going to be there for the Mets series and get dumped after. But I guess good for him. He lasted a little longer. But that's I think we're going to wrap up this week. Obviously, we got one day left with the trade deadline. A lot of things could happen between now and tomorrow. Hopefully, a lot of good things for the Mets. Some holes filled there, a nice bat, and a late inning reliever would be great. But trust this front office. Just with the Vogelback move alone, it looks so good. So, and in general, the signings that they made and everything, just got to trust that they're doing their thing and they're going to do the right thing. Because for the first time, I guess, in a while, for us as Mets fans, it's all about winning. So they're going to do whatever they could take there, and I appreciate that. But we'll keep you updated with next week's show, but everything that happened at the deadline. We'll recap the National Series, Jacob deGrom's first start of the year, all that after it happens this Tuesday. But until then, everybody, let's go Mets.